And we welcome you to the Friday morning show on WGTD. I'm Gregory Berg. I am really delighted at the opportunity to reunite with Amy Greil, who was on the morning show not terribly long ago to talk about the work that she does with the Kenosha Community Foundation, and to talk about a lot more than just the work she does, but the work that all kinds of other people do on behalf of the foundation and the tremendous good which they do in the community as a whole. And of course, it was an opportunity to talk about the way the Kenosha Community Foundation functions and the difference that it can make. Well, Amy Greil is back, and she has brought two people with her who are deeply and significantly involved in the work of the Kenosha Community Foundation. One of them is Dave Gertzen, who is the president of the board, and as we're going to find out shortly, he has actually been a part of the foundation for quite a few years, although he is brand new to the presidency of the board. And along with Dave Gertzen, we also have with us Tom Clark, someone I have known for quite a few years. I met him primarily in his work as a wonderful storyteller, but Tom has been involved in all kinds of other events and activities in the community, especially related to the arts and to nature. And Tom is here because of the important work that he has done with a special grant that he helped to create. He is the founder of a very special grant, the CBK grant, which is making a big difference in the lives of children in particular. So we're so happy to have all three of you on the morning show. We welcome you to the program.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. So, Amy, as I said before we went on the air, for the sake of anybody who didn't hear our first conversation, and shame on them for missing it, we should probably just revisit a few of the most basic sort of foundational items about the foundation, what exactly it is, and at least in essence, how it functions.
Sure, thanks. So the way I look at a foundation, or especially this very special form called the Community Foundation, is that it is a public charity. So certainly all of our donors will benefit from a tax deduction by getting involved with us. But essentially what I like to think of is a two-sided coin. So on the one side of the coin, we have all of our donors and fund advisors, something akin to Tom Clark here, that come to us with passion and a legacy and ideally funds, money, resources, if you will, and ideas. And then we have the other side of the coin that is the community and all of the nonprofits and students, depending on how they interact with the foundation. We have a number of beneficiaries of sorts. And then in the middle of the coin, that kind of the spinning part is the investments that we make in between. So you bring us funds, we invest it, we gain interest, and over time, all of those funds tend to increase in value. So it's a perfect recipe for making an impact in the community.
Remind us how long the Kenosha Community Foundation has been in existence.
So we are celebrating our centennial in 2026. So I see that the United Way has been around that long as well. But yeah, our foundation with the visionaries locally that decided that we should set up a model similar to this in Kenosha, that was 100 years ago. And we're so pleased that we've been able to find support to basically grow this organization over that time.
Great. Dave Gertzen, I know you've been around with the foundation for a long time, not quite since 1926.
Yeah, right, not 100 years.
No. And I know you've been involved in a lot of different ways and only recently became president of the board.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about kind of the on-ramp. How did you first become involved with the foundation?
Well, thank you. I worked at the county, and I was asked by the administration to look into the community foundation and see what I could do to help. And the first thing I did was volunteer for an advisory committee on grants and scholarships. So what happened was I was serving on this advisory committee. What the committee does is receive applications for the various scholarships and grants that we provide. And back in the day, nothing was automated, so I would work. I would carry home these giant boxes of applications. They're probably 50 pounds if I added it all up, and we would go through all of these grant requests, scholarship requests, and this advisory committee really reflects the grassroots of the community foundation. All people from the community come together to serve on this grants committee. So I loved it. I saw so many of the grants that were wonderful. One in particular, the VITA grant that we provided, was I saw it as a way of levering our resources to pull millions back to the community to make sure that people were getting what they were due from their tax returns. So just so many ways that we levered the funds. So I loved it. I loved working with the foundation. There was a guy named Bob Schneider who is the president. Everyone loves Bob. And he tapped me on the shoulder. He says, "You want to be on our board?" And me, I can't say no when I'm asked. And so I served on the finance committee then for many years. And then just recently, the leadership of the board asked me to serve as president. And I succeeded a wonderful, wonderful leader that served for about a dozen years, Ken Feldman. So now I'm in the seat as president, loving it, and continuing my service to the foundation.
Great. So explain what the essential function of the board of directors is.
So I've been on many boards, and ultimately the board, the purpose is to look after the sole purpose is to look after the best interest of the foundation, the best interest of the operations, the best interest of the funds. But the thing that I love about the foundation is we're serving the community. So I've served on a lot of different boards. I was a trustee for the State of Wisconsin Investment Board. That's a permanent fund. And so you can see the beauty of the way a permanent fund works. Now that is a dedicated fund. Over $100 billion, it's more than a needle mover. It has a huge economic benefit to the community, but it's dedicated to basically pension and managing the finances of the state. I was president of a Rotary Club, and so with the Rotary Club, generally what we would want to do is have fundraisers and then grant the money in and money out. But we were able to create one fund that was a permanent fund that came over to the Gateway Foundation, and it now is a scholarship for an area that's greatly needed, which is for law enforcement, for jailers and for police. So you can see the range of the way permanent funds have benefit the community, but the thing the board does here is we serve the community, and that's the difference. This fund the board serves the whole community, and this fund is the community's fund. It's not for a specific purpose. There's many funds that are very generous benefactors, but here, all the 170,000 people that live in Kenosha, this fund is to serve their community. Now, the board does a lot of other stuff. We're in charge of setting a strategic plan, which we just have recently undertaken. We're almost ready to button that up. We make sure that we engage in best practices because the dollars that are donated are precious. So we make sure that we have the very best, as Amy will talk about later, the very best backroom processes to make sure the dollars are invested well and protected, and we have the best internal controls, and make sure we have a modernized our infrastructure. Thank you for helping me with the words there. I'm just a finance guy, not an academic, So, but so the board, but ultimately, long answer short, it's our sole purpose is to look after the benefit of this precious community foundation.
Right. And what's interesting to me is, as you just kind of alluded to, you're a numbers man in so many ways, and yet as important as the numbers are, I mean, and they're of incredible importance, all of this is not ultimately about numbers. It's about making a difference and helping people. And clearly that's a passion for you as well.
It is, but it's humbling though. It's really humbling to be able to work with the Community Foundation. But when you say it's a passion, I think most people have this in them. So if you really want to help the Community Foundation is a great way to do that. Mm-hmm. And so for all of those out there that have a passion similar to mine, look to the Community Foundation. There's so much good that we can do. Mm-hmm. So.
For those of you just joining us, we are talking today about the Kenosha Community Foundation with three people very much involved with it. You've just been hearing from Dave Gertzen, who is the president of the board of directors as of 1 month ago, but his history with the foundation goes back more than 2 decades in a number of different capacities. We have with us executive director Amy Greil, and we're going to hear very shortly from Tom Clark, who has also been a very important part of the Kenosha Community Foundation as a founder of one of its very, very special grant funds. So, Amy Greil, just talk for a moment about kind of and you've already kind of touched on the two sides of the coin, the fact that this is about bringing money in, and then it's about sending money out in the community. Can you just kind of help us understand how those two things work together, and where are you and your staff in terms of keeping that flow healthy?
Sure. So I see my role, it's multifaceted, but my role is certainly donor cultivation. So we are, actively engaged with a variety of different groups, networks, really working through our existing donors. That's another really important path to donor cultivation. But my space is absolutely trying to tell the story of who we are. And as I said last time we met, Greg, is really helping others determine and articulate a legacy for themselves and their families. So what is the passion? Where does that grow from? Because everyone is certainly driven by, some higher ideal or value, I like to think. So it's helping people uncover that. So that's a big piece of this puzzle, because we certainly cannot do anything without our donors. It starts there. But then, speaking to the community agencies, excuse me, and the students that are beneficiaries, it's really also about bringing them to the table to help them understand the role of their nonprofit, even within a community broadly. And we, as a foundation, can assist them to build capacity so that they can learn how to write grants and be collaborative. I really do believe funders, such as the foundation, have to be in that space of advocating for community collaboration. So often, many of our, nonprofits feel the scarcity sort of mentality around funding, because of course it is very, very lean. However, if we as a funder can really advocate for continued collaboration and thinking differently and innovating through partnership, that's when our dollars go farther. And that's when I think relationships in the community really kind of come along to a more mature state.
Right. So before we bring Tom in, I want you to speak more generally about the decision that ultimately Tom and his wife made to bring their resources to the foundation. So one choice that somebody could make who has some money in the bank or some resources of one kind is to just decide, I'm going to write a check to so-and-so and try to, make some kind of impact. And of course, you are wanting people to understand this other possibility, which in a sense is a much more exciting possibility in a whole lot of ways. Explain what happens when somebody takes their own resources and directs it to something like the Kenosha Community Foundation?
Sure. So I would contrast, the two perhaps options that a person of means could consider is giving to a nonprofit directly, right? Or bringing it to a foundation and establishing what's called an endowment. So in my sense, certainly it's the donor's choice, but I would say if a donor is interested in giving directly to a nonprofit, so often the nonprofits actually bank their funds for those times that will be lean. So they actually create or operate almost as though they have an endowment anyways, internal, and yet that endowment is not invested and largely not managed by professionals that really understand how to maximize those dollars. So that's why I like to think for sure about a community foundation that manages very strategically its endowments and has the long-term interest of the donor. This is a permanent endowment. So say I wanted to give to the Literacy Council, just as an example. I'm not favoring it, but nonetheless, say I wanted to give to the Literacy Council. You could give directly to them, certainly, and they can keep the lights on and, reach their students, absolutely. However, if you look at the Community Foundation, you can ensure a distribution annually to the Literacy Council. You could set up a donor-advised fund. You could still give annually in perpetuity to the Literacy Council and ensure essentially that fund can continue to grow over time, so that distribution annually will continue to grow too. So it's really, really, I think, much more strategic to think of endowments if you have the opportunity to do so, because the long-term sustainability of an organization really can be sustained through endowments.
Right. And of course, that's why you utilize that term of legacy, because, in a sense, you're making an impact in the moment when you just sit down and write a check. But when you are creating something that creates legacy, that creates perpetual support to an organization you care about, that's a whole different thing. It's taking it to the next level.
Very powerful. It's very powerful, yes.
Well, let's talk to somebody who has taken that very step that we were just talking about, namely Tom Clark. And of course, many of you listening and or watching this interview are probably acquainted with Tom Clark and the marvelous things that he has done in the community over the years. Before we talk about what you've done with the foundation, maybe just give us a sense of how long you have been a part of the community and the different things to which you have devoted your energy and your many talents.
Oh, thank you. We've lived here for almost 50 years, and we moved here from Minnesota years ago to take teaching jobs in Zion, Illinois. And then we crossed the cheddar curtain every day to work, so it was fun. Anyway, but we have really found Kenosha just a wonderful place to be and to raise our family, and it's just been a marvelous place. But I have had a lot of diverse activities over the years, and I think some people would say I can't pay attention to one thing very long, and maybe that's why. But besides being a kindergarten teacher for a long time, when I retired, I began exploring the arts because as a kid growing up on a farm in Minnesota, I could have taken all the agriculture classes I wanted, or more than I wanted actually, in school, but there were no art classes. We had none, no fine arts of any sort. And I was always interested in the arts. So that pent-up demand when I retired from teaching was that I would explore the arts in some way.
Make up for lost time.
That's right, and I did. My wife was a junior high librarian, and she brought home an article one day about a man who lived in France in the 1940s and 50s named Raymond Isidore. And Raymond Isidore was a cemetery sweeper. He cleaned graves in a large cemetery, and when he did, he found broken pieces of pottery and shards of china and whatever, and he compulsively picked those up, put them in his pockets, carried them home, and he began decorating the inside of his house with these shards. And he decorated every surface in his house, floors, ceilings, walls, everything. His wife said that the only thing that he couldn't figure out how to do was to do the sheets on the bed. He did the bed frame and the head and the foot of the bed, but not the sheets. Anyway, then when he finished the inside of his house, he did the outside of his house, and he did his garden. 33 years he worked on it, and the neighbors, of course, thought he was crazy. So they called him Picassette, which means plate stealer. It was a joke, but the name stuck, and that's what the article that Ruth brought home was about, and I was just fascinated. Picassette. Broken china. And I thought, I'm a recycler. I like to recycle things, so why not recycle plates? Broken plates, chipped plates, cracked plates, whatever. So I do. I break things. So all these other wonderful artists in Kenosha, and we have lots of them. They're just marvelous. And they do terrific things. And they all make things. And I break things. So there we go.
You break in order to make. So,
yeah, that's right. But anyway, that sent me in the direction of Lemon Street Gallery. And so that has made a really big impact on me, and I've been involved with them for more than 20 years now.
Fantastic. You, of course, have also loved the art of storytelling, and you are also a very, very talented and hardworking gardener, and I was so thrilled to be able to see your spectacular garden with my own eyes this past summer. Well, of course, we have you here to talk about more than gardens and broken plates. We have you here on the morning show to talk about the decision that you and your wife made to take some of your resources and to try to create something in tandem with the Kenosha Community Foundation. So, first of all, kind of take us to that moment of decision where you and your wife made this choice, and what prompted you to want to do it.
Well, we found out that through some of our investments that we were going to get RMDs, required minimum distributions, and which means we were going to get some money, which was nice, but then we were going to be charged a high rate of tax on those funds, and we needed to take them out. And so just by happenstance, one day we were downtown and we went by the foundation office, and we thought, well, we could just talk to somebody about what we could do to invest those funds and not get charged the tax. So we walked through the door, and Bob Schneider was there, and he just spontaneously started to talk to us about possibilities. And we had thought, well, maybe we could do some kind of small fund of some sort that could be added to something else, or what, we weren't sure. And he just talked about all the possibilities of building up something over a long period of time. And so that's what we started to do. We contributed that year, and then the next year we contributed again. And about that time, we met Tom Targos, who was also active in the foundation. And we began to bat around ideas about how we could mold some sort of fund. And I really, because I taught kindergarten for more than 35 years, I was really focused on young children and nature and also the arts. And so things that were important to me growing up, and I wanted them to be important to other kids all over. And when Tom Targos started talking to us about it, all of the ideas kind of gelled together. And so that was really kind of a magical process. And it all is a process, I think, this whole business of giving. But at any rate, Tom brought a fund that he had named in honor of his mother's family, the Kabatowitz family. And so, and ours is called Clark Barber, Barber after my wife's maiden name. And so that's where the CBK comes from. But thanks to Tom Targos' creativity, it also stands for Creativity by Kids. And that really helped focus our thoughts about the grants as well. And we were interested in doing small grants of $500 to $1,000 because we had discovered at our school district in Zion, that teachers and people who work with children are terribly creative. They really, really, truly are. And if you give them funds, and they don't have to be a lot, they can really create wonderful activities and wonderful resources. So in our case, we really did do mini grants in our school district. They were $50 to $100. So these are much higher price, $500 to $1,000. But it's really been just a fabulous process for us to see how these grants evolve and the kinds of grants that groups ask for. And so, for example, just as an example, last year we gave a grant to Pringle Nature Center to help develop their creative playground. And that was fascinating to me because, again, they wanted to plant raised beds of native plants that were sensory plants that kids could smell or taste or somehow interact with. And it would all be wheelchair accessible because they were raised beds and part of their already existing playground. And that was just a fabulous thing. Another grant that we gave last year was to Hawthorne Hollow for their maple sugaring process that they do with kids in the spring. Again, a wonderful hands-on creative process for all of us, not the kids in all of us, I guess. And also the year before, we gave a grant to the Kenosha Public Library for its story walk programs to help them create those all over the city and the area. So those are the kinds of things that we get. Another part of the process that I find fascinating is we do not, as the grantors or whatever, we do not make the choices about who gets what. It's set up so that a committee of volunteers from the community read all of the applications and make the decisions, and we applaud them. It's just been wonderful to see their choices and the kinds of reactions.
I can see how somebody might really appreciate that if someone does not want to bear the responsibility, and particularly, I'm sure it has to be painful if there are many more applications applicants than can be served by a given fund, and to be the person that says yes, yes, no, no. That's I for one, I can imagine not wanting to have to do that or have that responsibility, and plus you're delegating that to people who have experience in that and so on. But the other thing that I'm really struck by, Tom, as you were describing this, is how much you've learned about what goes on in the community. I mean, just as people come to you with applications for, we want to do this, or we want to expand this thing we're already doing, and what a marvelous way to just kind of find out what's going on around you, and the new things that might start happening if they get funding. And so I should think this has been a wonderful learning experience for you and your wife, among many other things.
Absolutely, it has.
Amy, can you explain kind of the logistics, how a fund like this that Tom has been describing, how exactly it functions, beyond all of the information that Tom's already given?
Sure. So kind of behind the scenes, if you will, we are working with legal counsel to create what's called a fund agreement. So, when I meet with Tom and Ruth and Tom Targos, they say, well, I'd like to set up this, sort of arrangement. We go to, legal counsel to draft this fund agreement. In the agreement, we spell out, because this is going to be an endowment, perpetual in nature, so we need a binding contract of sorts with the donors. So in that agreement, we spell out, is it endowed? Is it a spend down, as we say, the alternative to an endowment? What is it named? How does it function? And ideally, we can put in there a little bit about the spirit of the grant, so that for all coming time, this isn't somehow repurposed to suit some other generational need, that this is really stays in the spirit of the originator. After the fund agreement is signed by the donors and by our board, it goes into action and we bring the money in. And like I say, that's where, it goes to work in the market. And then annually, Tom and, the CBK gang will be afforded that distribution where they can put it out as grants annually. And we keep the corpus or the principal, and it's just a revolving door of goodness from there.
I like that. Could you quickly delineate the difference between two things you mentioned? I think the two possibilities were an endowment versus a spend down. So I think it's relatively obvious, but nevertheless, clarify exactly what those two possibilities are, and maybe why someone might be prone to choose one versus the other.
Sure. So with the endowment, as I suggested, this is perpetual in nature. So we keep the corpus, or that initial principal. The interest, of course, compounds the value of the fund, and then we're making that distribution annually to afford community to benefit from that fund.
And you're distributing from the interest.
The whole value. So as the asset average, we look at a 12-quarter asset average of that fund. So certainly the interest is a part of it, but generally the asset broadly it can exceed perhaps what just the market. I mean, we've seen some of the market downturns where, the market isn't helping the fund at all, but perhaps we can still make a distribution or not. I mean, depending on if this fund is actually what we call underwater. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but if it's underwater, we wouldn't make a distribution, meaning that the value of the fund has dropped below the initial corpus or the initial investment.
Right. And so this is designed in such a way to preserve the fund forever, essentially. And
Exactly.
you make certain decisions. So this fund always exists, and one hopes ultimately will grow, versus this other possibility of a spend down, which I suppose would be, here's this money, do something with it, spend it, and then it's gone.
Right. So what I've seen is some people bring, a relatively small, in our vantage point, if they brought $20,000 to us or even less. I mean, we'd like to deal in the minimums of around $50,000 to establish a fund. But, on occasion, we've done special arrangements because of extenuating circumstances. And people can say, I want to give a $1,000 scholarship. Well, we say the distribution formula doesn't afford a $1,000 award. And they say, well, what options do I have? And I say, well, if we don't endow it, then you can access principal and, we move through it. And what I've seen is, particularly some of our largest donors, once the second generation comes to being, the initial founders of the fund bring us, $1 million, the second generation may say, you know what, it's getting hard to manage this. Can we just begin to issue, larger awards, and get this out to the community versus using it as endowment? So you can understand the argument for a spend down occasionally, but certainly in our work, we pride ourselves in the very special nature of what we do, which is, as Dave suggested, permanent. And we want to be here for the long term of ourselves, of course, but then also of the future of Kenosha.
But just to be clear, you manage both. I mean, whatever that decision is made, that is something that the foundation can handle.
Yes, historically, we've really dealt in both. I would say, maybe a third of our funds to date are spend downs. But certainly when they're gone, and that's something we have to talk about with the donors, that, this isn't, at times people, they just actually spend the full fund and then they look at us, well, why can't we, do more?
Because the money is gone.
It's really just, dollars and cents. But at the end of the day, we are looking at our business model, and certainly we collect fees on all the funds because we have to fund our office. So if there's spend downs, that also is a challenge for us because essentially we're losing ground over time and we still have to administer the fund.
Sure.
So if we take 2% or 1% of a fee, usually that's the range, a spend down really can afford us very little. And so we're looking at minimums as a finance committee and fee structures that make sense for the amount of administration. In Tom's case, they do all the work for us, really. We just write the checks. But for the scholarship funds, some of these can be extremely labor intensive. We're, having to really facilitate a lot, and it's quite a burden. So
right. Reading applicants.
Reading the applicants and supporting all the students, calling us and saying, well, why hasn't my check come through? And it's like, well, is your email working because you haven't responded to us for, 8 months?
Yeah.
So things like that. We're just trying to look because we're, have to be a business as well. So, looking at our fees structure and certainly paying our staff well is something we're very invested in doing.
Right. So Dave Gertzen, as a member of the board, now the president, what facet of this do you and your colleagues get involved with? And are you involved with those who bring funds, or are you, in a sense, really working directly with the money?
So we work with the money. The administration works with the community. What I'll say is we're in charge of oversight of the foundation. So we make sure we have a good administration in place. But the board does a lot of reach out. We do work with the community, and we also want to work with the administration to try to enhance the endowment. So if there's anyone in the community that is interested in this, we want to reach out and work with them and do everything we possibly can. So the board's pretty active that way. We're pretty active with events. We're pretty active in the community. The board is an active board that does everything it can to enhance the future of the foundation.
Very good. Amy, I wanted you to explain one other thing that came up as Tom was describing his situation with his wife. He made mention at one point of RMDs, of required minimum distributions, especially for the sake of somebody who isn't maybe yet at that point in life where that's something they've dealt with. Explain what an RMD is and why it might prompt someone like Tom and his wife to do what they have decided to do with the Community Foundation.
Sure. So I'll make sure that Tom can correct me if I misspeak on this, because I am one of those that certainly isn't well versed in what an RMD is, because I just haven't gotten to retirement age, unfortunately, yet. Look forward to the day. Nonetheless, generally, if people have IRAs, 401ks, or whatever that may be, they are certainly generating interest. I mean, when Dave talks about the Wisconsin Investment Board, that is all public employees that are eligible for pensions and however that looks. So in any case, people are saving for retirement. But once you get to a certain age, you can't continue to just sit on that fund. The IRS required minimum distribution, that you start drawing upon those funds. They don't want necessarily people to be just sitting on this and then passing it off to their next generations either. So in this case, Tom, as an example, is required to take this distribution, but as he suggested, there's significant tax implications for
because
doing
it's essentially income.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's income. So if you don't touch that RMD, in Tom's case, he just authorizes it to go, and this would be done through your tax preparer or your financial planner. You would make an arrangement that it just seamlessly comes from your retirement fund over to the foundation. If you don't touch it at all, you don't pay the tax on it. So certainly, I'm all about people paying the taxes that they're required to pay. However, why pay unnecessarily when you can bring that to a local resource and keep that tax money that ultimately would have gone back to Washington or however, just keep it right here in Kenosha and let's kick it out to a bunch of kids. So it's a beautiful recipe, and I'm just so glad that the tax code essentially affords us this opening, and that's part of the reason I wanted Tom to be here, because there is a wealth of folks looking soon at their retirement options, and we want to make it as easy as possible for them to consider this option.
Right, and this is also a possibility that might not necessarily occur to people.
Yes.
I mean,
Exactly.
they might not make. In fact, it's interesting, Tom. I think as you told your story, it sounds like you kind of blundered into this in the sense that you were walking down the street and there's the office, and so I mean,
Exactly. It was spontaneous at that moment. But
right.
it was a good decision on our part, and we're very glad we did it. But when I was younger, by a couple days, I was notified by my school district that at the age of 70 and a half, I would start to get those required minimum distributions. That change that has occurred now in that age, I believe. And so you can be older and have to start taking those. But that was a real legitimate concern for us, and I'm glad we did stumble onto Bob Schneider, and
Absolutely.
he twisted our arm.
Right.
Not very hard.
Right. Well, and what a good feeling to know that that money has made a difference in the projects you outlined for us and countless others, and will go on even after you're not even around to see that. I mean, to know that this good thing is going to continue in perpetuity, as they say, has to be an amazing feeling. Amy, before we finish, I know that, and you've touched briefly on this fact, that one of the things that you have been anxious to do is really continue to bring the Kenosha Community Foundation securely into the 21st century, and a number of things have been done, including a revision of your website that I know you're very, very excited about.
Sure. So, I come from a nonprofit and academic sort of space. So my interest has always really been on like organizational development. So when I came into the foundation, certainly I was so, interested in actually like fortifying the organization itself. Certainly we have all the external relationships and donors and things like that, but I was looking internally. Fortunately, people like Dave on our board bring that real strength and the accounting, on the investing. That is not necessarily the field I came from. So what I've been able to do over the last year, and I just had my 1-year anniversary, is really look at how we can modernize and, what was the word, bolster our internal controls, our accounting. We've actually outsourced to some extent, working with external accounting firm, much of what we are doing in-house, just to maximize sort of our human talent, and also that's internal controls at its best when we have other people checking, and ultimately creating one more layer of accountability on us. So there's all of those things, and then you can look at the fun stuff, which is branding and modernizing our external sort of face. And so when we did our strategic planning process, we incorporated the logo and just the marketing elements, so that we've rebranded to have a new logo, and our landing page is now going to be refreshed as of airing on this show. So we'd love to have people kind of come online, see what we're doing, and hopefully get just the taste. That is not the extent of what we do, but if you can get a taste and then reach out to us, that's where the power begins.
Sure, and you can tell the story even more fully and explain to people all of the many and varied ways that they can go about doing this to create a legacy for themselves and for the community, and just extend the good that they want to accomplish. It's a great, great story. I'm so glad all three of you could be here to tell it. Amy Greil, Executive Director of the Kenosha Community Foundation. Happy 1-year anniversary.
Thank you.
So good to have you here. Dave Gertzen, a longtime devoted volunteer to the Kenosha Community Foundation, and now serving as president of its board of directors. Wonderful to have you here as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Tom Clark, so good to have you here to give a real tangible example of the benefit of making the step that you and your wife did with the CBK fund, the
Creativity by
Creativity by
kids. You
kids.
got it.
Creativity by kids.
I got kids and children mixed up there, but wonderful to hear that story and of how it came about and how it goes on from here. Thank you for being here to tell that story, and best wishes to all of you and everybody associated with the Kenosha Community Foundation.
Thank
Thank you so
Greg.
much.
Thank you.
I'm Gregory Berg.